day now, one that could land the country back on state sponsors of terrorism list. Sarah Sanders hinting at that last week.
I believe the president will be making an announcement and decision on that at the first part of next week. We'll keep you posted on those details.
All right, let's bring in Jillian Turner, former national security staffer to Presidents George W. Bush and Barack Obama, former member of the National Security Council and a Fox News contributor, a role we like to live with. Jillian, thank you for being here this morning. This is a very big deal, an announcement, a decision the White House says could come down early this week. Will they or won't they?
Well, first, can't I just talk about the turkeys?
Oh, sure. Bow and tie. Mm-hmm.
I love that they stay. I didn't know that they got to stay at the Willard. That's like a whole new spin on things.
Fancy. Only the best.
So switching gears to North Korea, which is what you brought me here to talk about. So the president's going to decide and announce maybe today if he's going to add North Korea back to the state sponsors of terrorism list. They've been off since 2008. They were on the list from 1988 through 2008. George W. Bush took them off because they agreed to certain concessions on their nuclear program. They agreed to curtail it, curb it back, but the last 9 years have shown us that was disingenuous. So now President Trump is faced with the conundrum of, do I or do I not?
So there was some speculation, Jillian, that he was going to make this decision and make the announcement before he left on his recent trip to Asia. He did not. Ed Royce, House Foreign Affairs Committee chairman, weighed in, saying there's no reason to further delay this. Take swift action. Why the delay?
I think part of the reason he didn't announce before he went on this Asia trip is because he probably wanted to discuss that with our allies in the region. So with South Korea, with Japan, maybe even with China. It was something I think he wanted to have sort of circulated. Remember, part of his new approach to North Korea is this big multilateral push. It's the United States isn't going to stand up to North Korea unilaterally on our own. We're much stronger together with all these other countries. So I think any moves that are dramatic like that, like adding them to the state sponsor of terrorism list, he's going to want to circulate with the other folks too and have a team approach.
So he's got his intelligence briefing this morning. He's got the full cabinet meeting happening in the 11 o'clock hour, and then he's meeting with Secretary of State Rex Tillerson as well as U.S. Ambassador to the UN Nikki Haley in the afternoon hours. So a busy day for the president on this holiday shortened week. Meanwhile, his son Eric Trump weighing in over the weekend on his father's role on national security. Listen.
He's done more to mend relationships, over in Asia than has been done in the last 3 decades by any, all other previous administrations. And I think having, 3 or 4 aircraft carriers parked right off the peninsula really shows the might of a nation and also makes it very, very clear that we're not playing. My father's not playing. Mattis, believe me, these aren't people who play games.
His father is not playing when it comes to national security and is being taken seriously. Eric Trump weighing in. Jillian?
Well, there's no doubt the question is being taken seriously. A big purpose of the trip that he just undertook was to mark a sort of reset. President Obama famously announced that he was pivoting towards Asia and then sort of on the policy front didn't really follow through. So what President Trump is trying to do is announce, look, this is the pivot to Asia 2.0, if you will, and I'm really going to focus on this region of the world. We're trying to get out of the Middle East. We're trying to get out of these sort of wars that drag on for decades there because nothing good is coming from it. We're focusing on Asia, the economic power engines of the world right now. Our relationships there are more important than ever. Part of this means dealing with Kim Jong-un's nuclear threat,
right.
A big part of it.
So the White House making it clear some sort of a decision or announcement could be coming today on North Korea and a very busy agenda as far as national security is concerned. We'll have you back next time, Jillian, to discuss turkeys.
Thank you, Sandra. Finally, something I care about.
Good to see you this morning.
With the construction of the Atlanta Falcons' new Mercedes-Benz Stadium moving closer to completion, they are planning to implode it. As you can see,
ready to see this?
Certain portions of the Georgia Dome.
But I learned from Jerry Jones that best to get rid of the old one because no one would ever come to the new one if you don't get rid of the old one.
Is that what he always said? That's why I got rid of the other place. Here's the other thing. For one last time, if you're inside and watching us, please get out. It's about to collapse on top of you.
Apparently, the Falcons had put on hold a decommissioning until there were no doubts the facility would be ready for the 2017 season. It will be, and here she goes. Watch.
And by the way, it's going to be converted to a green space to tailgate, and that
That's
means
what we do best down in the South,
right.
Brian.
Yes.
That means you got to put a little thing there to show where the stadium once stood, and people are going to be
Hosted
drinking
2
there.
Super Bowls there. Do you have any memories?
I do. I tell you, I have a lot of memories because there was a high school football played there, and I think there was a young woman that was one of the best kickers in high school in that Georgia Dome there.
Wow.
Well,
and it means a lot to the
How
people
far away
there.
did you grow up?
I
This is
grew
in
up
Atlanta.
about 2.5 hours from Atlanta, so I sat down where if you got 1 year to live, you move to my hometown.
All right, that's great.
Well,
Do you go
apparently-
back a lot?
I go back a lot.
You
My
going for
mom is still
Thanksgiving?
there.
Your mom's
Yes,
still there.
My mom's
I
still
know
there.
she's proud
I
of
still
you.
remember in your doorstep announcing that you're coming out as a junior,
Oh,
and
gee,
that is it.
that's a
I am
long,
going
long time
pro,
ago.
and it's
That's
USFL.
Yes.
well, it's going to be the end of an era. We're told that in the next few seconds, they've closed off all the roads in the area. The neighbors have been forewarned. The new facility, which is right there next to it, will be home to the MLS Atlanta United, which will will have a Falcons preseason game against Arizona on August the 26th.
And by the way, it's the
NFL
same owner. It's the same owner that owns the MLS team, that owns the football team. So he's building it all.
You know, in our college, we have our stadium next to our stadium. All the green spaces, people buy them and they convert them to great tailgating spots. You can buy a parking lot in there.
can.
They're very lucrative. Is it the same in the NFL?
It's the same as the NFL. And one thing that's great about this Georgia Dome, a lot of people don't realize when you do the parking lot, you can see the game going on. The Jumbotron, you can see from outside of that stadium.
Wow.
So you can sit outside and
You don't even have
tailgate
to
and
have
watch the
tickets.
game. You don't even go in.
You know, the Georgia Stone might have gotten a stay from the president. Maybe they had
That
pled
would be
for
from the
its own
governor.
life. For the
Yeah.
governor. And maybe they had second thoughts about blowing it up. Right.
So the Mercedes-Benz Arena is right next to it, Herschel? Is
Yes,
that
the
right?
Mercedes-Benz Stadium right next to it. And I tell you, that is a wonderful, wonderful stadium. A matter of fact, I gave away a car at the opening game of that stadium.
You give away a lot of cars.
I give away a lot of cars. I give away a lot of cars.
We were told it was going to happen within 5 seconds, and of course that didn't happen. So
That
any
was-
minute it's
that
going
was
to blow
3
up.
minutes ago.
What's
Yes.
your advice to kids that are watching that have a dream of playing in the NFL?
Well, my advice is continue to work hard. My advice is never give up your dream. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't.
There it
because
goes.
I'm living proof
There we
you
go.
can.
Whoa.
Oh.
There you go.
Wow.
I guess there's a way to do this that it seems kind of organized for an explosion.
There it
Let's,
goes.
let's listen. The whole idea is for it to implode, just explode straight down so that it doesn't damage anything around it.
It's so much quicker than
And
taking it down
looks
piece by
as-
piece.
It looks like
I mean, do they tell
It's
people in the surrounding area,
Oh,
close
yeah.
your windows,
Yeah.
close your mouth,
They've
don't
not-
breathe this in?
they've known about that for a very long time.
Right.
Well, there you go.
So there it goes. For the people of Atlanta, Georgia, I didn't think that other place looked too bad. I was shocked that they were blowing this up to build a new
Well,
one.
it's not that old. That's what I was thinking. I don't think that stadium is not that old. That's what's so weird about
Are we
it.
sure we want to do this?
But doesn't it come down to the new one probably has more luxury skyboxes?
That's
stuff like
exactly
that?
right,
all
and I
for
think
money,
that's
right?
what it's all for
It's
money
all for
because
money.
that's where the owners make their money.
That's right.
Is from the skyboxes.
And you
Well-
just wonder, too, how much the state had to kick in, if anything. But Arthur Blankett's the owner of that team. He's got cutting-edge facilities. Of course, his team went to the Super Bowl a year ago, and they had this to build off on. They're not having the same season this year, however.
Oh, yes, that's exactly right. Right now they're having a tough season, but I tell you, they got time. They got time to turn it around.
Right.
You know,
Especially
you
if
think
get
about
to-
those kids that played in that stadium. They were 18 years old, or I guess 20 when they're drafted, or whatever. 21. They played in that stadium. Now it's gone. They did this for the Coliseum, where we had all of our journalism classes at the University of South
It's
Carolina.
all about
Yeah,
progress.
It's all about
They didn't blow
progress.
it up,
Hey,
but I
I hate
do-
it when they got rid of the Texas stadium, but the stadium Jerry got now is wonderful.
One more time, Herschel, how do we
Yes.
get involved with your heroes?
You can go to rocketridgegive.com, register your veterans, active military and first responder.
Right, and this is the first time you've ever done color commentator on an impending explosion.
Oh, my first time ever doing this.
And you did
My
great.
first
Round of
time.
applause for
No, yes.
Herschel Walker with the
Yes.
Georgia
Yes.
background. Good job.
There it goes. All right.
Herschel, I know you said you support the president. There's a band that wanted to go to the inauguration. And this is when a lot of famous people and bands were pulling out. They didn't
That's
want
right.
to be there.
Yes.
This high school right there, they came on our show. They asked people to go on the GoFundMe page. They needed, what was it, $130,000 to
Yeah.
go?
And there it is, the presidential inauguration. They had a chance to go. The
They got
president
to
was
go
there to
because of our
salute.
viewers.
That's
Right.
right. So we're kicking off a week of giving thanks here during the Thanksgiving week, taking a look back at some of the great causes our viewers helped with this year.
That's right. Joining us live from Naples, Florida is the band director, Annabelle Saraminto, Palmetto Ridge High School principal, John Brimseth, and head drum major, Adrian ATTN, I believe is how you say it, and the entire Palmetto Ridge Marching Band. Thank you so much for being here. What does this mean 1 year later?
Adrian?
1 year later, it really means a lot to me because I thought I had a really good experience, and it was a wonderful time to be able to be a part of something so historic and to be part of such a great band and to be able to do that with my band.
Annabelle, let's go back to about a year ago when you got the invitation and you thought this is going to change all these kids' lives. Oh, wait a minute, we don't have the money. How do we tell them we can't go? And then what did you do?
Well, of course I was very concerned about all of that, but you know, I just tried to be positive, and we were just hoping that the students would be able to fundraise their way and that maybe we could get some support from the community. So when that turned into a lot of support from the community and the country, it was just really overwhelming and just a wonderful experience.
And John, as the principal, what was it like for these students when they finally got the inauguration, the president noticed them and respects them and even knows their story?
Well, I think it was a great experience. I mean, it's a life-changing experience. For the opportunity to be able to attend an inauguration, to be a part of that process and part of that proceeds was a great experience for the students, for the chaperones, for everyone that was involved, and a great representation from Palmetto Ridge High School.
Surely. And John, while you're right there talking to us, tell a little bit about how a GoFundMe page had been started, and you got some money, but then when you came on Fox and Friends, how it really kind of started to snowball.
Yeah, that was an amazing day. So they started the GoFundMe page, and we were kind of trucking along, you know, donations here and there. But when Fox decided to feature the band and the decision to go, within 1 day, we had the amount of money in the GoFundMe page that enabled
awesome.
all of our students to go for free.
Our viewers are so supportive and so loyal. We have the best viewers out there. Annabelle, what was your reaction when you saw all that money come in?
I was just in shock. The phones at the school were ringing off the hook, and it was just really exciting. And then to constantly see the donations come in online was just, again, overwhelming. And I was just so grateful that there were so many viewers out there and people that were willing to support our students. It was great.
So I understand you have a performance all for us. It's all lined up. The sheet music is on the right page for Something Blue. Am I correct, Adrian?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
All right.
Yeah, this is the last part of our show from this year, so it's called Something Blue.
Well, you know what? We're done talking from New York. How about you take it away down there in Naples, Florida?
Thank you. Trevor.
Very nice. The Palmetto Ridge High School Marching Band.
Beautiful job.
Take them
They're
bow.
so
That was
talented.
excellent. All right. Congratulations. Meanwhile, coming up, one college flushing their respect for our police officers right down the drain. Officers now banned from using the bathrooms on the main part of campus. They got to go way out to the edge of campus.
Yeah, in Brooklyn. And soldiers have served in the U.S. Army, but the Army has never had its own museum. Until now, Pete Hegseth, an Army guy himself, gives us an exclusive sneak peek at what's inside.
More than 30 million Army soldiers have served and sacrificed in the U.S. Army.
But can you believe the Army does not have its own museum? That is about to change.
Our own Pete Hegseth got a sneak peek. Where is this museum?
That's true. It's at Fort Belvoir in Virginia, just outside of D.C. And I got a chance to visit the site where it's being built, right there, and see some of the amazing items that will be inside. You know, to not have a national museum for the Army is shocking. There's a lot of regional museums, but not one consolidated place. They're doing it now. We got a sneak peek. Take a look.
The Ark is somewhere very safe.
You've seen it in the movies. But did you know there really is a government warehouse like this? Located at Fort Belvoir under tight security, it's filled with artifacts that tell the story of the Army's history.
Dr. Jennings, how are you?
Nice to see you again.
The last time I met this guy, he was Sergeant First Class Jennings, and we served together in the Massachusetts Army National Guard.
That's right.
Dr. Patrick Jennings is a historian, the perfect person to give a sneak peek at some of the artifacts that will move to the National Museum of the U.S. Army after it's completed.
All right, so this is the oldest flag that will be on display at the Army Museum, correct?
That is correct. This is the flag of the 1st Regiment of U.S. Infantry. This is a militia drum from Massachusetts. It's decorated with a symbol, Latin, dulci et decorum est pro patria mora, which means it is fitting and proper to die for one's country.
From the Revolutionary War to World War II.
What do we got here?
We have probably the most significant cap in Army history, the hat of Douglas MacArthur. This is the hat that was made famous in the iconic photo of him wading ashore back in the Philippines.
Can I put it on?
Oh no, I'm afraid you can't.
I can't put it on. Can't put it on. I'm gonna get, how about this? I'm gonna get really close. Like this, almost Douglas MacArthur. Nope. Can't touch, can't do it. I know, sorry. I've never seen anything like this. What is it?
This is a homemade weapon, if you will. This was made by a German soldier in World War I, so we're coming up on 100 years of age. This is something a German would have carried with him on a trench raid.
From the weapons used by our enemies in hand-to-hand combat to the weapons used by our enemies today.
This is a haunted motorcycle. It was used by the Taliban to move IEDs from the bomb maker to the bomb planter. This is a piece of the landing gear from one of the aircraft that crashed into the World Trade Center in 9/11/2001.
This looks like what used to be an engine. Where from?
This came out of Mogadishu in Somalia. This is the engine from Super 6-1. A helicopter that was shot down from the famous Black Hawk Down incident.
One of the things the Army Museum is striving to do is tell its history through the stories of individual soldiers.
This is the Bible of Mr. Melvin Nesterby. He carried this Bible with him through the Bataan Death March, which he survived, and into a Japanese prisoner of war camp. It tells the story of a man who had the will and the faith to survive. When a visitor walks into the museum, they'll start encountering these large stainless steel pylons. We've put soldiers, individual soldiers, and a brief history about them.
Also throughout the museum, life-sized and extremely lifelike soldiers.
A lot of these cast figures are active duty soldiers or former soldiers. Currently in the Army.
The idea is to take the visitor to the museum and put them inside the action, inside the vehicle, inside the firefight.
Absolutely.
What better way to help put visitors on the battlefield than with battle-worn vehicles? The Army Museum is literally being built around 4 of these, already in place at the construction site.
So I can't say I've ever been underneath a World War I tank.
This is the FT-17, 5 of Hearts. We actually found bullet holes, we found a bullet embedded, and we've kept that battle damage to show the visitor.
What's it been like to watch a project that's been many years in the making sort of rise from the ground?
Really an honor, a tremendous honor.
For those families and others who have contributed to our nation's service and sacrifice, this is special.
As you can see, the museum is not yet finished, but the projected opening of the museum is late 2019. They've raised a ton of private money to make it happen. They're still a bit short. To donate, visit armyhistory.org. It's going to happen either way. Some very generous individuals making sure that it happens. Very cool. It'd be a great place to bring soldiers, but then kids, teach them about the Army.
So, Pete, they would take a $20 bill, right? They would take anything, right?
Anything.
Okay.
Yep.
It's great that it will finally be a repository to all that cool stuff they've been
And I
collecting
didn't.
through
I
history.
wanted to put MacArthur's
You
hat
can't.
on.
No,
I just
come on.
couldn't do it. I had like 10 eyes
What
on
if
me.
you wore gel and it would have come out?
Will the U.S. Congress wind up with some sort of a tax cut bill that the President of the United States could sign? There he is. He just kissed the tax form, the size of the tax form. If the House plan went through, you could do it on something the size of a big postcard.
Right, but now it's up to the Senate to get there through. And there's 5 or 6 holding out. But I think for the most part, you should be heartened to know no one's sitting back. They're saying, I'm not ready yet, but I want to get to a yes for the most part.
All right, so there's 6 holdouts, you say, or 6 people with concerns that are Republican senators. The Republicans can only afford to lose 2 of those votes, so they've got to negotiate at least with 4 of those just to make sure their concerns are fixed so that they're happy and they're going to vote yes.
Yeah, Susan Collins has got big concerns, not only about the Affordable Care individual mandate, she wants it to stay in there, but she also she's concerned about the state and local taxes. She doesn't want that to go away. She wants the bottom corporate rate not to be 20%. She wants it 22 or 23%, which the House, rather the White House says is a non-starter. And then you got Jeff Flake, who wrote the anti-Trump book that came out about 6 months ago. We've got sound bites from both of them, and they sure don't sound like they're on board with this. Listen.
President Trump was not my choice for the Republican nominee for president. I want to see changes in that bill, and I think there will be changes. There's some provisions of the House bill that I like better. There are provisions of both bills that I like, but I think the bill needs work.
Come the party of Roy Moore and Donald Trump. We are toast.
Right. So you should understand, they were both talking about personal conduct and allegations during the campaign. But when Susan Collins was actually talking about the plan, she likes most of it. And one thing she did not like is the release of the mandate. But she did bring up the fact that if you tell people they don't have to buy insurance, that's actually going to help the working class more than anybody else. And she brought that up herself, almost contradicting herself. So I think that she is, unlike when it came to Obamacare, I think she's trying to work herself to a yes. And I think it was also interesting that Mick Mulvaney said that if people have a problem with releasing the mandate on Obamacare, we'll get rid of it if it stops passing.
So Senator Cork and Flake, they say they're worried about the debt. It's going to drive the debt up. You have Ron Johnson, Senator Johnson, who said it's unfair to small business. We talked about that last week. Too much for the corporations. And then Murkowski and Collins, they don't want to repeal and replace Obamacare. And then John McCain wants the military to get at least $700 billion for the fiscal year of 2018.
Sure. So ultimately, you've got these 6 Republican senators who want big changes, but if they do make changes, then that could alienate other Republicans in the Senate. We had Kellyanne with us just about an hour ago, Kellyanne Conway, the president's advisor. Why is the president pushing the Republicans right now? This is what she said.
We'd prefer to have those conversations and those debates now than just have somebody show up and be a no vote. That's why the president himself went over to Congress last week. That's why my colleagues and I are there nonstop, out in the hustings, out bringing the case to the American people and taking in their inputs and their ideas and reflecting that in this bill.
So what they got to do is they got to deal with each other first. I mean, President Trump has certain things. He gave 4 general outlines of what he wants in this plan. So I think that the Senate is closer than they ever were with Obamacare. The only person I haven't heard from, because he's been injured because of the crazy thing that happened where he broke his ribs and bruised his lung, I don't know where he stands on this, because he's usually a hard yes or a hard no. The others are just looking to get to a yes. In fact, I talked to people with Senator Corker's camp over the weekend. He says there's no doubt about it. Ivanka came to see the senator. He's definitely trying to get his hands dirty and work towards it.
Apparently, Rand Paul, he's of the point because he's super conservative. He doesn't want anybody's taxes to wind up going up, but there are some projections. Some could. We're going to talk to Senator Marco Rubio from the great state of Florida coming up in about a half half an hour.
Ivanka also went to Maine to talk to Senator Collins, and she told us last week she really thinks that she'll be on board for tax reform.
Right. So meanwhile, something else happened yesterday in the NFL, the roster of NFL games. The Mexico City played host to the Oakland Raiders and New England Patriots. Patriots won big, but before the game, news was made. It was the first story on Drudge throughout most of the day. Marshawn Lynch, the controversial running back from the Seattle Seahawks who took a year off and came back with the Raiders, decided to do what he always does during the national anthem of late since Kaepernick sat down, and that is sit. He's been sitting all year. He sits in Mexico City for the national anthem, and he stands for the Mexican anthem. And the president has just about had it.
Yep. The president tweeted this out just about an hour ago. Marshawn Lynch of the NFL's Oakland Raiders stands for the Mexican anthem and sits down to boos for our national anthem. Great disrespect. Next time, NFL should suspend him for a remainder of season. Attendance and ratings way down. We asked you whether or not you felt like you were feeling badly about football and whether or not you would be watching it this Thanksgiving. And overwhelmingly, according to our email, a lot of you simply will not turn on the television and watch the NFL play football on Turkey Day.
That's right. Well, you had Herschel Walker, who was supporting everyone who stands up. He supports the red, white, and blue and our troops, and he says that this is a shame that these guys are kneeling or taking a knee or sitting on the bench during the national anthem. Hats off to him for saying that. It's about the sacrifices that our military men and women are making overseas. They're not home for Christmas. These are millionaires that are sitting on the sidelines and they're kneeling on the sidelines. Choose a different platform. Choose a different time, not during the national.
I also have a problem with the fact that they're protesting law enforcement, who I think for the most of the time does a fantastic job, 99% of the time. Jillian Milley, talk about doing a great job, 100% of the time. There she is.
Oh, thank you. And, you know, law enforcement are right there along the sidelines as well during the game. So
Keeping
they're doing
them
it
safe.
right in their face. That's, I think, the hard part for a lot of people.
Got Senator Jeff Flake from the great state of Arizona caught on a mic. Let's bring in Republican Florida Senator Marco Rubio. He joins us from down in Miami. Senator, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
What do you make of Jeff Flake saying that, you know, if we become the party of Roy Moore and Donald Trump, we're toast?
Well, first, those are two different people.
They
and
are.
second of all, I mean, obviously, Jeff feels very strongly, and I think he's made his feelings known. I don't think he said anything on a hot mic that he hasn't kind of implied or said directly in his other speeches. Look, I think we have a fundamental challenge in understanding, you know, how to bring together a party for the future that is a majority coalition to govern this country. And part of it has to be one of the things that Donald Trump really woke up in his campaign, and that is addressing working people across this country. They, you know, some of the press like to say white working class. It's working class of all backgrounds who feel like they've been ignored and disrespected by leaders in both parties for the better part of 25 or 30 years. I mean, these are the people that make too much money to qualify for government assistance, but not enough money to afford many of the things that modern life requires of us. And so they feel left behind, and their values, they feel disrespected in their values, and the result is they got angry, and they've let themselves be known in the ballot box. We have to be a voice for them, and at the same time, we have to stand by our principles of limited government and free enterprise and a strong national defense. And so that's the party we need to be working towards, and within that coalition, there's room for a lot of different views and a lot of different people. But one of the most important things we have to confront in tax reform is, what are we going to do for the working people in this country? Because there's a lot going on there for companies and big corporations and multinationals and hopefully for small businesses. And none of that is bad. We need that for growth, but we also have to take care of working people that are making $40,000 or $50,000 or $60,000 a year and are struggling with the cost of raising their families and so forth.
Right. I see you segue. We'll finish up on your tax reform talk. We'll come back to this. But just on this plan right now, what are you looking to add to it, or what do you see your responsibility to getting a vote and having this pass?
Well, for me, the one area I'm really focused on is on the child tax credit. And it's not a welfare program, as some people like to accuse it of. You don't get it if you're not working. For almost half of Americans, their primary, if not sole, tax liability is payroll tax. I want to make the supply up to the amount of payroll tax. So if someone's out there making $35,000 or $40,000 a year, for example, a single mother who's working as a home health aide trying to raise 3 kids, if it's not refundable, then she's not really going to see much of an increase in her tax cut, which she needs to raise her family. Now, again, she doesn't get it unless she's working, and she can only get up to the amount that she paid in payroll tax. But we need to encourage work. We cannot be a country where you're better off not working, and having 3 kids because of the government programs than a country where for $35,000 or $40,000 a year, you end up losing money. It's not, the refundability part is not in there now. It has to be in there in order for this to be truly effective. We need to reward work, and we need to take care of people that are working really hard and trying to get ahead to keep more of their own money as opposed to sending it to Washington so Washington can spend it on their behalf.
That's great. I have some friends that say they want to work, but it doesn't really pay off because when you pay for childcare for the kids, they're spending more on childcare than they are getting in their paycheck. So I think that's great. What do you think the folks of Florida, or folks you represent Florida and the people there, what do they think about Senator Flake and his comments? Do you think they care? Do they still support the president?
No.
What are you hearing?
Yeah, I don't. Well, look, I respect Jeff, and he has his opinion. He's a friend of mine, and we work together on a lot of issues, and he's truly a principled conservative guy. But, you know, this is the stuff they talk about, and I don't mean to criticize you guys. I'm not saying you in particular, but this is the stuff they focus on in New York studios every morning. But people this morning got up and went to work. And I think many people feel like a lot of what's going on in Washington is just being exaggerated. They may not agree with every tweet the president puts out or every word he says, but they also see how everything he does elicits kind of this overreaction on the part of some in the media, or, you know, it seems almost like we've become a country where everybody wakes up in the morning and tries to figure out, what should I be outraged about today?
But, Senator, you know that if you've got a sitting senator from Arizona who's taken a shot at the man who is the leader of the party, that is news. But let me ask you the question this way, to borrow Jeff Flake's expression. If the Republicans in the Congress don't pass some sort of tax reform, you are toast, aren't you?
Well, I think we have to pass something because that's what we ran on. Look, this is the party of people like myself and others who ran saying, if you elect us, we are going to do everything we can to repeal and replace Obamacare. That has not happened yet. We're going to fix the tax code if that doesn't happen. And the third thing is obviously that we're going to rebuild our national security, and we're going to deal with some of the issues like regulations. Now, on the regulatory front, progress has been made. I think people will be very pleased that how we're now starting to really work through a lot of the judges, the judiciary, the third branch of government, getting people in there that understand the proper role of the courts. That's positive progress.
You got 9 of them in.
Right. Well, no, more than 9 now. I mean, we keep rolling through all these district and circuit court judges around the country. So by the end of the year, we'll have made a substantial dent in the number of vacancies that are being filled by good jurists that are going to be there in many cases 20, 30 years. But I do think tax reform is important, but not just for the Republican Party. And elections come and go for the country. We need to be a country where our economy is growing again, and not just creating jobs, but jobs that pay more. And I would say that if we don't get tax reform done, then those out there who are looking to invest or grow their businesses are going to lose confidence, and that loss of confidence will lead to less job creation, less economic growth. And it's not the Republicans that are going to pay a price, it's the American people. They're going to pay a price through a slower economy. That's the main reason why we have to get it done.
Are you surprised that Senator Al Franken will not resign after these pictures have come out?
Well, obviously, I think that's going to be taken up by the Ethics Committee, and I'll let them begin the process. I share everyone else's view on it, and that's unacceptable, and clearly, you know, something that I think has outraged a lot of people. I don't think he's denied his behavior,
no, he hasn't. He apologized.
We all find to be unacceptable. And to his credit, he's owned up to it. Now the question is, what are the consequences for it? And you know, sometimes people make decisions on what they want to do moving forward after thinking about it for a few days or a few weeks and talking about it with their family. I have no insight on what he's going to decide to do, but I do know the Ethics Committee is going to take this up, and that process could potentially reveal more or not. We'll see. And I'd like to let that work through, because we may learn more about this, which actually may make it worse. I don't think you can make it better.
Roy Moore staying in, doubling down. The alleged 14-year-old was out on another network already talking in detail about their interaction. What should happen to Roy Moore's situation? You urging Jeff Sessions to go for his old job back?
Well, I don't know about the Jeff Sessions part, because I think he's happy being Attorney General. Look, I think these charges are very serious. I think these accusers are very credible. And I don't think, quite frankly, that Judge Moore has done anything in the last 10 days that has helped his cause or in any way you know, lowered some of the anxiety that's out there about it. And, you know, in my view, and I've said this before, you know, I think we're going to learn even more as this goes on. And even if he's elected to the Senate, I think there's going to be a process that many people in the Senate are calling for that could reveal more and be very potentially problematic for him. In fact, I guarantee it would be, given the nature of these charges. But I don't think he has said or done anything in the last 10 days that's either convincing or helpful. And I think his accusers have outlined very detailed allegations that seem very credible and are very serious.
All right, Senator from the great state of Florida, Marco Rubio, we thank you very much for joining us on your Monday of the holiday week. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator. Have a great
Thanks
Thanksgiving.
for having me on.
The 3 UCLA players arrested for shoplifting in China. Ball belittled the president's role in helping to free his son and the other players from the Chinese legal system, which could have meant prison time. The president tweeting, quote, "Now that the 3 basketball players are out of China, saved from years in jail, LeVar Ball, the father of LiAngelo, is unaccepting of what I did for his son and that shoplifting is no big deal. I should have left them in jail." Kristen Fisher live at the White House for us this morning. Kristen, so walk us through what prompted that tweet from the president.
Well, Sandra, it's clear that President Trump believes that he played a very big part in getting those basketball players out of China. Remember, he says that he personally asked President Xi for help and possibly expended a lot of political capital in doing so. So it's clear that he was very offended by what one of their fathers told ESPN on Friday. One of them, LeVar Ball, was asked about, President Trump's involvement in this, and he told ESPN what was he over there for? Don't tell me nothing. Everybody wants to make it seem like he helped out. So he kind of belittled the president's involvement. That's what prompted the president's tweet. And now you have critics like Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff weighing in, saying that that tweet from the president is beneath the office. Here's the tweet from Congressman Schiff. He says the president would have left American students in a foreign jail because their families didn't lavish sufficient praise on him. How can someone in such a big office be so small? So that's what the critics are saying. But another thing to remember, the players themselves actually did thank President Trump personally when they had that big press conference last week after returning to the United States, Sandra.
All right, and the White House laying out a very aggressive schedule for the president on this holiday shortened week. What's on the agenda today?
Well, it's aggressive because this is the last full day for President Trump here in Washington before he heads down to the Winter White House in Palm Beach. He's got a big day planned. We've got a full cabinet meeting in the morning. Then he's going to be having lunch with the vice president. And then in the afternoon, he's going to be holding an Oval Office meeting with his Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, and the U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley. Now, the #1 priority for this administration, especially this week and heading into the holidays, continues to be tax reform, getting tax reform done before Christmas. And this morning, counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway, says she believes that in the end that they are going to have the votes they need.
We feel very confident, but it is up to those legislators who for years, if not decades, have been promising their constituents they're going to get meaningful tax cuts and tax overhaul.
Now, the other thing to watch for today, President Trump may be about to make an announcement about whether or not his administration has decided to add North Korea to the list of state sponsors of terrorism. The White House press secretary had said last week that that could come at some point during the first part of this week. So watch for that today, possibly tomorrow before the president leaves. And then, Sandra, the other big news of the day, the White House Christmas tree arrives this afternoon. So
always
it's
a nice
Christmas
moment.
time.
Yes, indeed. All right, Kristen Fisher, thank you.
Spectacular place to be during the Christmas, too, the White House. For more on this now, Byron Norton, chief political correspondent, Washington Examiner, Fox News contributor. Byron, good morning to you.
Good morning, Bill.
You put the LeVar Ball story in the same category as the NFL protests and believe this is a feud where the president wins. How come?
This is a feud where the president wins, just like in the NFL protests, because first of all, when the president actually did play a role in helping to release these 3 basketball players, when they thanked him for doing that, the president released a fairly gracious statement telling them to, stay out of trouble and have a great life. And it was only after the father, LeVar Ball, came out and said, one, that Trump didn't do anything to help his son, and 2, that shoplifting isn't a big deal anyway, that the president struck back. It's a classic Trump counterattack. And in this case, it will have the support not only of his base, but most Americans who oppose shoplifting. So this is just one of those feuds. It's not a big deal, but the president wins.
Let's turn our focus to North Korea. Big meeting at the White House today on North Korea. What happens there, Byron? What's important to pay attention to today?
Well, North Korea was on the state sponsor of terrorism list from 1988 to 2008 after they blew up a Korean airliner in 1987. George W. Bush took them off that list in hopes that they would comply with a nuclear agreement in 2008. That didn't work. And now there's been a lot of talk, especially after Kim Jong-un assassinated his half-brother, that they should go back on the list. It would be another way to put pressure on North Korea, another way to isolate them, and it has a lot of bipartisan support in Congress, so this is something the president could do, and it would be, I think, widely accepted in the legislative
Interesting,
branch.
important to watch, too. Meanwhile, here at home, you heard Kristen Fisher talk about tax reform. You can circle half a dozen Republican senators that are indeed worth watching for the next couple of weeks, I would guess. What is important for the White House in its strategy to get this passed now?
Yeah, this is a dangerous time now. Obviously, passage in the House was a big deal. But now in the Senate, the danger is that it will become kind of a game of whack-a-mole, that on one day they're dealing with Senator Susan Collins' objections, and on the next day they have to deal with Senator Ron Johnson's objections, and the next day they have to deal with Senator Bob Corker's objections. I mean, there's senator after senator who has problems with this. Some of those problems are fixable, and they'll be fixed through negotiation. But the president, this could turn into this game of whack-a-mole where the president spends the next few weeks actually courting individual senators to get this thing through.
My sense is you get a breather for the Thanksgiving turkey break, but after that it is every hour of the day.
Maybe 24 hours, yeah.
Thank you, Byron.
Byron, thank you, Bill.
You bet. Nice to see you there. House making a big push for tax reform. A continuing feud, meanwhile, between President Trump and outgoing Senator Jeff Flake coming at at a very inconvenient time, let's say. The Arizona Republican caught on a hot mic bashing the GOP and the president the following way.
Come the party of Roy Moore and Donald Trump. We are the toast.
We are toast. Former Congressman Jason Chaffetz, Fox News contributor. How you doing?
Glad to be here. Good morning
to you. Should our audience know you talked to Jeff Flake a lot, right?
Very good friends with Jeff. I spoke with him on Friday. You know, this isn't necessarily a new position for Jeff Flake, but I don't think it's productive. I mean, they don't need a personal spat right now. We're trying to pass tax reform, and you got the president, Jeff Flake, with his own little personal battle. That's not helpful, nor is I think it effective.
Here was the president's tweet over the weekend. It was yesterday on Sunday. Senator Jeff Flake, he writes, who was unelectable in the great state of Arizona, quit race, anemic polls, was caught purposely, he says, on mic saying bad things about your favorite president. He'll be a no on tax cuts because his political career anyway is toast, in quotes there.
I don't think Jeff will be a no because of his spat with the president. I think he does have some legitimate concerns about the bill, but I think he will rise above that. But I also need the president to understand it's about math. It's about addition. We need to bring people in and get them voting for the bill, not just berating a person that he actually needs to vote.
Senator Flake's office suggested that he'd look at the bill and he would grade it on its merits. So, I mean, he's not necessarily a no vote on taxes. You agree on that?
Oh, absolutely agree. But I do wish that the Senate would immediately bring up the House bill. Why is it dead on arrival? Vote on that House bill. Put people on the record, and I think they could actually pass that thing.
Okay, there's another feud going on, and I don't know how much longer this thing's going to live, but apparently it's got a lot of legs. Right. Hillary Clinton over the weekend talking about President Trump and more.
Apparently, you know, my former opponent is obsessed with my speaking out. Apparently there was somebody told me, tweet today. Honestly, between tweeting and golfing, how does he get anything done? I don't understand it. So maybe that's the whole point.
So as they say,
he gets things done.
We've got that to look forward to.
Yeah, well, look, it gets things done because he's President Trump, and everybody's paying attention to what the president is doing and saying and accomplishing. You know, Hillary Clinton was very, very clear. She thought she was going to win. She was on this glide path, and she went out of her way to say, well, will you accept the election. Will you understand that, the voice of the people is the voice of the people? Donald Trump won 30 of the 50 states. It really wasn't even close. So as a Republican, I kind of like the idea that Hillary Clinton might run again. I think that would, because I think President Trump would demolish her again. But at the same time, it's getting pretty old to hear from her.
And the president said, go... Can't paraphrase it, but chill out and come back in 3 years if you want to run again. Right. But remember, toward the end of the election last year, she was questioning whether or not Donald Trump thought democracy was legitimate in America, and now it has flipped 180 based on comments there.
Yeah, I know. I don't know what world she lives in, but he won the election. It was clear. You had even President Obama say there was no way to manipulate the election even if you wanted to. And quite frankly, Bill, it wasn't even close. When you win 30 out of the 50 states, that's
electorally, you're right. She would make the case that she won the popular vote by 3
She won a lot of Californians,
however,
no doubt.
Here's my take. I think they're obsessed with each other.
Yeah. No, this is a personal feud that has gotten really personal. I don't think they'll ever let it go. I think it'll be day in and day out. I don't think that she can drift off into the sunset. I think she is just absolutely beside herself, and I'm okay with that.
If that's the case, then there's more to come on this. Thank you, all right? Have a great Thanksgiving, all right?
Well.
You bet.
New reaction now after President Trump's war of words with LeVar Ball, father of one of the UCLA players arrested for shoplifting in China. President Trump saying the players face prison time, and he doesn't like Ball questioning his role in their release. The president responding, quote, now that the 3 basketball players are out of China and safe from years in jail, LeVar Ball, the father of LiAngelo, is unaccepting of what I did for his son, and that shoplifting is no big deal. I should have left them in jail. Ball downplayed his son's shoplifting incident, telling ESPN, quote, they try to make a big deal out of nothing sometimes. I'm from L.A. I've seen a lot worse things happen than a guy taking some glasses. Marianne Marsh is a former senior advisor to John Kerry. David Hoppe is former chief of staff for Speaker of the House Paul Ryan. David, what do you make of this war of words?
Well, I would have hoped that Mr. Ball would have been a little more gracious for what the president did to help his son. I would have hoped the president would have been a little more gracious in the response. But to say it's nothing to shoplift, yeah, there are worse crimes than shoplifting, yes, but this clearly was a big mistake, and nobody ought to dismiss it. And the president was very helpful and essential in getting his son released. I think we could find both sides being a little more gracious, and that would be good for all of us.
I should have left them in jail is the final response. I wonder if we're going to hear any more as the day plays out. Marianne?
Well, I mean, Donald Trump has artfully used Twitter to keep people focused on other issues like this one rather than some of the other news that's come out in the last 72 hours or so about the Russia investigation. I don't recall Donald Trump, however, asking other Americans who've been detained abroad that have been released in the past year or their parents to thank them. Now, to these young men's credit, they admitted their mistake. They apologized for it. They've been held accountable for it. And yes,
but
they
Marianne,
thanked
let's
him
face
as well.
it, his punishment their punishment could have been a lot more severe had they been left in China.
Sandra. Absolutely, but here it's his job. Tens of thousands of Americans work in federal government, congressional offices. David worked in one. I was a Senate staffer in this country and around the world, and you help Americans when they're in trouble abroad. You don't tweet to ask to be thanked. You don't tweet about it.
That's his
Millions
style,
of
and
those
some
things
say
happen.
maybe the father of the son who was just released from there at the request of the president maybe could be a little bit more gracious to David's point. I want to move on because allegations of sexual harassment, assault, misconduct really taking over Capitol Hill last week. As we move into this new week, we see that Al Franken spokesperson is speaking out saying he will not resign. They put out a statement saying that he's spending time with family over the holidays and doing a lot of reflecting. David.
It is a very difficult situation, and we have to be very careful in looking here. It is clear, it seems, that this was a 2-week situation, which he was on this USO tour with this woman and was really sort of sexually harassing her during the whole tour. That's a pretty significant problem. It's sort of interesting with Senator Gillibrand talking now and her reorientation about President Clinton. What's she going to say about her colleague, Senator Franken? I'd be interested to see, because clearly the investigation that some have called for has to go forward, and we have to look at this situation with his his conduct during this USO tour and whether there's anything else there.
And clearly, Marianne, this is the conversation that's getting all the headlines on Capitol Hill right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think this is the end of it either. This could be the tip of the iceberg. But to answer David Hoppy's question, I mean, Senator Gillibrand and all the other Democrats have condemned Al Franken, have taken any contributions they have given him and donated them to charities, many of them women's charities. So Al Franken has admitted his mistake, apologized for it, and is being held accountable. You can't say that about Roy Moore and a whole lot of other people on the Republican side either.
And in Politico's words this morning on Kirsten Gillibrand, going where no other prominent Democrat had before on Thursday evening by declaring that Bill Clinton should have resigned the presidency during the Monica Lewinsky scandal. Roy Moore is still defiant as of this morning. He's leaving it to Alabama voters to decide what happens next. Meanwhile, one of his accusers, who was then a 14-year-old girl, is speaking out this morning. Listen.
How do you think that interaction affected your life?
Well, it took away a lot of the specialness of, interactions with men. It took some trust away. It allowed me to delve into some things that I wouldn't have otherwise. It took years for me to regain a sense of confidence in myself, and I felt guilty. I felt like I was the one that was to blame.
Leah Korfman, again, she was 14. Roy Moore was 32 years old, and laying out her story this morning. David?
Roy Moore should leave the race. Sometimes the country is more important than you personally. All the stories that have come out, I don't find his denials convincing. He should leave the race. That's what he seems to have done is simply disreputable. It is horrible. Nobody who has done that should serve in the United States Senate, and the decent thing to do would be to leave this race.
Marianne?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with David. And how brave of Lee Korfman to come forward and tell her story as a 14-year-old girl who was abused by a 32-year-old man in power. And what is especially disturbing is to watch so many ministers and the governor of Alabama and others somehow rationalize that they need to vote for Roy Moore so there's one more Republican in the Senate instead of standing up for a 14-year-old girl, standing up against a pedophile and all the other charges against him. And that will haunt the Republican Party as a values party who has long ran on family
election
values.
is just
can't do that anymore.
It's amazing to think it's just only a couple weeks away here. We'll see how it all plays out. David, Marianne, thanks to both of you for coming on this morning.
We feel very confident, but it is up to those legislators who for years, if not decades, have been promising their constituents they're going to get meaningful tax cuts and tax overhaul. And we're very happy that the House and Senate have come up with what I call Trump speed, not swamp speed, in getting their bills to the floor fairly quickly.
There's Kellyanne Conway earlier today expressing confidence the White House can win those sitting on the fence when it comes to taxes. Carl Rowe, former Deputy Chief of Staff, President George W. Bush, and a Fox News contributor. Carl, how are you? And good morning to you in Austin. Looks like a lovely day with the screen behind you there.
It is. Happy Thanksgiving week.
Thank you. And to you as well. I hope you get a drumstick if that's what you eat on Thanksgiving.
I can't eat turkey. I'm allergic.
Oh.
Ham, man.
Well,
Ham
look at
for
this.
road.
Party pooper each time. Listen, I want to show you a list of senators, Republican senators, who are the keys to watch now. Some of them can be won over, like Ron Johnson, all right? He's already suggested he could. What do you think is most important about the people on the screen now?
Well, that is the group, and let's take a look at a whiteboard that shows why they're hanging in the ballots. You mentioned Ron Johnson. His concern is he wants to pass what are called pass-through small businesses that file on the individual tax rate. He wants them to have a tax rate that's equivalent to the 20% corporate income tax, and that's very expensive to do. But that's what he's holding out for.
Wow. Okay.
Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski concerned about including the repeal of the individual mandate from Obamacare, which they're concerned about what that does to the health care market. On the other hand, repealing the individual mandate, in essence, adds a bunch of money to cover the deficit, because the government doesn't have to put out subsidies for the people who elect not to buy insurance. But there are 2 members concerned about that. The deficit impact. You had a number of people up there who are concerned about this. Most notably Jeff Flake and Bob Corker. And they're concerned about 2 things. They're concerned about the size of the deficit. They don't think that it's $1.5 trillion. Resolve those is going to be an individual discussion with the members. Finally, child tax credit. We earlier today, Marco Rubio was on. The question of how big is that tax credit? The Senate is larger than the House, but still not as large as Rubio wants. And then he wants it to be refundable. That means that it goes to people who, it's a tax credit that goes to people who don't owe any tax. So in essence, it's a transfer payment, a welfare payment, if you will, a support for a poor family that doesn't pay any income taxes.
Very interesting.
And that's what all of these issues are tied up with. And if you move the dial on one of them, it affects the amount of money that is available for doing other things. I mean, it's a very complicated deal, and you're going to have good faith to get it resolved.
But one thing I'm not hearing from you or anybody else is cut spending. You can get around a lot of this debate by cutting spending. You can get a lot more room in the tax bill if you cut spending. Now, Steve,
except that you can't do that in a revenue measure. You have to do that in the appropriations measures. That's why I think Speaker Paul Ryan was so right to say when they passed the bill, this is part of the answer. The other part of the answer is for us to get really determined to rein in future spending. Now, it doesn't mean that we need to cut from where we are today. It simply means that rather than spending this much in the future, we spend this much in the future in order to keep the delta of our deficit from growing dramatically.
Steve Mnuchin was with us on Friday. He was with Chris Wallace on Sunday when he said the following. Treasury Secretary here.
This is technical issues in the Senate, and the corporate side is about jobs. This is the Tax Cut and Jobs bill. This is about making America businesses competitive so we can bring jobs back home and trillions of dollars invested here in the U.S.
I think he's right about that. I hope he's right about that. But my query on Friday was, how come these CEOs in America running these big companies aren't on TV every day saying, or in the Wall Street Journal saying, this is great because it'll help my company, in turn it'll help you? I don't hear that voice. The other thing Mnuchin will not do, he won't dodge a question like so many. He is willing to say some Americans will pay more in taxes. And that's something, frankly, I did not think I would hear from a Republican administration in Congress and in the White House. Go.
Well, let's take each one of those. First, yes, we need to get this done because this is about growing the economy. CEOs are loath to inject themselves into a partisan debate like this. But earlier, you were talking about this with Sandra. Goldman Sachs says it's going to be a great year in 2018. Their assumption was the tax reform, the tax cut is going to get passed. So I talked to individual business leaders, and I've been traveling the country the last couple of months talking to some of them. They believe that this will be very good for their bottom line, that this will allow them to increase wages, allow them to invest more in plants and equipment in the United States, and make our economy stronger. The second one,
I'd just like to hear from them more often, quickly.
Well, yeah, I would too, but they're not going to get involved in a partisan political debate like this is where Republicans are going to, no Democrat is going to vote for this unless their vote isn't needed.
Last point, quickly.
Well, look, this thing needs to get done, and the Republicans understand that, and it needs to get done for the purpose of growing the economy.
Too bad. I was shocked that they were blowing this up to build a new one.
Well, it's not that old. That's what I was thinking. I don't think that stadium is not that old. That's what's so weird about it.
Are we sure we want to do this?
But doesn't it come down to the new one probably has more luxury skyboxes?
That's exactly right. And I think that's what it's all for money, because that's where the owners make their money. That's right. Is from the skyboxes.
And you just wonder, too, how much the state had to kick in, if anything. But Arthur Blank is the owner of that team. He's got cutting-edge facilities. Of course, his team went to the Super Bowl a year ago, and they had this to build off on. They're not having the same season this year, however.
Oh, yes, that's exactly right. Right now, they're having a tough season, but I tell you, they got time. They got time to turn it around.
Right.
You know, you think about those kids that played in that stadium. They were 18 years old, or I guess 20 when they're drafted, or whatever. 21. They played in that stadium. Now it's gone. They did this for the Coliseum, where we had all of our journalism classes at the University of South Carolina.
It's all about progress.
It's all about progress. Hey, I hate it when they got rid of the Texas Stadium, but the stadium Jerry got now is wonderful.
One more time, Herschel. How do we get involved with your heroes?
You can go to RocketRidgeGive.com, register your veterans active military and first responder.
Right, and this is the first time you've ever done color commentator on an impending explosion.
Right? Oh, my first time ever doing this.
And you did great. Herschel Walker with the Georgia background. Good job.
There it goes. All right.
Herschel, I know you said you support the president. There's a band that wanted to go to the inauguration, and this is when a lot of famous people and bands were pulling out. They didn't want to be there.
Yes.
This high school right there, they came on our show. They asked people to go on the GoFundMe page. They needed, what was it, $130,000 to go?
And there it is, the presidential inauguration. They had a chance to go. The president was there to salute.
That's right. So we're kicking off a week of giving thanks here during the Thanksgiving week, taking a look back at some of the great causes our viewers helped with this year.
That's right. Joining us live from Naples, Florida is the band director, Annabelle Saraminto, Palmetto Ridge High School.
Have sort of circulated. Remember, part of his new approach to North Korea is this big multilateral push. It's the United States isn't going to stand up to North Korea unilaterally on our own. We're much stronger together with all these other countries. So I think any moves that are dramatic like that, like adding them to the state sponsor of terrorism list, he's going to want to circulate with the other folks too and have a team approach.
So he's got his intelligence briefing this morning. He's got the full cabinet meeting happening in the 11 o'clock hour, and then he's meeting with Secretary of State Rex Tillerson as well as U.S. Ambassador to the UN Nikki Haley in the afternoon hours. So a busy day for the president on this holiday shortened week. Meanwhile, his son Eric Trump weighing in over the weekend on his father's role on national security. Listen.
He's done more to mend relationships, over in Asia than has been done in the last 3 decades by any, all other previous administrations. And I think having, 3 or 4 aircraft carriers parked right off the peninsula really shows the might of a nation and also makes it very, very clear that we're not playing. My father's not playing. Mattis, believe me, these aren't people who play games.
His father is not playing when it comes to national security and is being taken seriously. Eric Trump weighing in. Jillian?
Well, there's no doubt the question is being taken seriously. A big purpose of the trip that he just undertook was to mark a sort of reset. President Obama famously announced that he was pivoting towards Asia and then sort of on the policy front didn't really follow through. So what President Trump is trying to do is announce, look, this is the pivot to Asia 2.0, if you will, and I'm really going to focus on this region of the world. We're trying to get out of the Middle East. We're trying to get out of these sort of wars that drag on for decades there because nothing good is coming from it. We're focusing on Asia, the economic power engines of the world right now. Our relationships there are more important than ever. Part of this
day now, one that could land the country back on state sponsors of terrorism list. Sarah Sanders hinting at that last week.
I believe the president will be making an announcement and decision on that at the first part of next week. We'll keep you posted on those details.
All right, let's bring in Jillian Turner, former national security staffer to Presidents George W. Bush and Barack Obama, former member of the National Security Council and a Fox News contributor, a role we like to live with. Jillian, thank you for being here this morning. This is a very big deal, an announcement, a decision the White House says could come down early this week. Will they or won't they?
Well, first, can't I just talk about the turkeys?
Oh, sure. Bow and tie.
I love that they stay. I didn't know that they got to stay at the Willard. That's like a whole new spin on things.
Fancy. Only the best.
So switching gears to North Korea, which is what you brought me here to talk about. So the president's going to decide and announce maybe today if he's going to add North Korea back to the state sponsors of terrorism list. They've been off since 2008. They were on the list from 1988 through 2008. George W. Bush took them off because they agreed to certain concessions on their nuclear program. They agreed to curtail it, curb it back, but the last 9 years have shown us that was disingenuous. So now President Trump is faced with the conundrum of, do I or do I not?
So there was some speculation, Jillian, that he was going to make this decision and make the announcement before he left on his recent trip to Asia. He did not. Ed Royce, House Foreign Affairs Committee chairman, weighed in, saying there's no reason to further delay this. Take swift action. Why the delay?
I think part of the reason he didn't announce before he went on this Asia trip is because he probably wanted to discuss that with our allies in the region. So with South Korea, with Japan, maybe even with China. It was something I think he wanted to have.
The MLS Atlanta United, which will will have a Falcons preseason game against Arizona on August the 26th.
And by the way, it's the same owner. It's the same owner that owns the MLS team, that owns the football team, so he's building it all.
You know, in our college, we have our stadium next to our stadium, all the green spaces, people buy them and they convert them to great tailgating spots. You can buy a parking lot in there. They're very lucrative. Is it the same in the NFL?
It's the same as the NFL. And one thing that's great about this Georgia Dome, a lot of people don't realize, when you do the parking lot, you can see the game going on. The Jumbotron, you can see from outside of that stadium.
Wow.
So you can sit outside and tailgate and watch the game. You don't even go in.
You know, the Georgia Dome might have gotten a stay from the president. Maybe they had played for the governor. And maybe they had second thoughts about blowing it up. Right.
So the Mercedes-Benz Arena is right next to it, Herschel?
Yes, the Mercedes-Benz Stadium right next to it. And I tell you, that is a wonderful, wonderful stadium. A matter of fact, I gave away a car at the opening game of that stadium.
You give away a lot of cars.
I give away a lot of cars. I give away a lot of cars.
We were told it was going to happen within 5 seconds, and of course that didn't happen. So any minute it's going to blow up. What's your advice to kids that are watching that have a dream of playing in the NFL?
Well, my advice is continue to work hard. My advice is never give up your dream. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't.
There it goes.
I'm living proof you can.
Oh, there you go.
Wow.
I guess there's a way to do this. It seems kind of organized for an explosion.
Let's listen. The whole idea is for it to implode, just explode straight down so that it doesn't damage anything around it.
It's so much quicker than taking it down piece by piece.
It looks like...
I mean, do they tell people in the surrounding area, close your windows, close your mouth, don't breathe this in?
They've known about that for a very long time.
Right.
Well, there you go.
So there it goes. For the people of Atlanta, Georgia, I didn't think that other place looked...
means dealing with Kim Jong-un's nuclear threat, a big part of it.
So the White House making it clear some sort of a decision or announcement could be coming today on North Korea, and a very busy agenda as far as national security is concerned. We'll have you back next time, Jillian, to discuss turkeys.
Thank you, Sandra. Finally, something I care about.
Good to see you this morning.
With the construction of the Atlanta Falcons' new Mercedes-Benz Stadium moving closer to completion, they are planning to implode it. As you can see,
you ready to see this?
Certain portions of the Georgia Dome.
But I learned from Jerry Jones that best to get rid of the old one, because no one would ever come to the new one if you don't get rid of the old one.
Is that what he always said? That's why he got rid of the other place. Here's the other thing. For one last time, if you're inside and watching us, please get out. It's about to collapse on top of you.
Apparently, the Falcons had put on hold a decommissioning until there were no doubts the facility would be ready for the 2017 season. It will be, and here she goes. Watch.
And by the way, it's going to be converted to a green space to tailgate, and that means
that's what we do best down in the South.
Yes. That means you're going to put a little thing there to show where the stadium once stood, and people are going to be drinking there.
2 Super Bowls there. Do you have any memories?
I do. I tell you, I have a lot of memories, because there was a high school football played there, and I think there was a young woman that was one of the best kickers in high school in that Georgia Dome there.
Wow. Well, and it means a lot to the people there.
How far away did you grow up?
I grew up about 2.5 hours from Atlanta, so I sat down where if you got 1 year to live, you move to my hometown.
All right, that's great. Do you go back a lot?
I go back a lot. My mom is still there.
Your mom's still there?
My mom's still there.
I still remember in your doorstep announcing that you're coming out as a junior. And that is it. I am going pro, and it's USFL.
Yes.
Well, it's going to be the end of an era. We're told that in the next few seconds, they've closed off all the roads in the area. The neighbors have been forewarned. The new facility, which is right there next to it, will be home to